Welcome, everyone, to the L7C Podcast NBA edition. Today, we are going to be talking some NBA offseason hoops. Going to talk about the Cavs draft pick. We're going to talk about a little summer league. Going to talk about some free agency. Going to talk a little Drew League. That's right, a little Drew League. But for all our basketball knowledge on the L7C, we got our guy, Mr. Evan Debo. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, Martin. It's been a eventful June, as you laid the table there. Tons of movement from the draft to players to and free agency to potential players. A lot to recap.
Yeah, so the way we're going to do it, guys, is I know we're a little behind, but it's all right. We're going to catch you up on the L7C side of things. We're going to talk about the Cavs picks in the draft, what Evan liked, didn't like about those picks. Then we're going to talk about players in the draft that we liked their picks. Some people went places we didn't think they were going to go. Then we will talk about KD free agency, and then we'll go into the summer league and Drew League stuff. But Evan, let's get right into it, man. The NBA draft did conclude about a month or so ago, and our Cleveland Cavaliers had some picks, and they were not the picks you nor I expected.
Yeah. So the Cavs ended up with the 14th pick in the lottery, selecting Kansas's Ochai Agbaji. And Ochai and the Cavs had been linked for a while, and I mean there were 4 or 5 guys, and it just mattered about just where where guys have landed. A lot of folks were interested to see if the Cavs would go for Jalen Williams of Santa Clara. Thunder would take him actually high riser in the draft, took him 2 spots ahead of them, so he was off the board. AJ Griffin was a surprising fall that was available. I think there were some health questions there. Really good spot shooter. The Hawks took him at 16. But it was really, by the time the Cavs drafted, I think it was basically between Agbaji and Griffin. We knew they weren't going to take Mark Williams out of Duke. They didn't need another big man. I'm still really high on Tari Eason out of LSU. Ended up going 17. So you had essentially 3 guys there, and then some homer discussion for, hey, what about Malachi Branham, who ended up going to the Spurs at 20. And that's such a Spursy pick, right? Getting Branham down the list there. But the Cavs with Agbaji, and now we've seen, we saw him play in 4 out of 5 summer league games before they shut him down, just to see what you're getting in him. And I think that's kind of what we were kind of looking for, was somebody who could space the floor in terms of perimeter shooting. We really needed, guys, when you have 2 non-shooters really in Mobley and Allen in the front court, because they do so much defensively and, are such, heathens in the paint, getting putbacks and being efficient and everything else. And Mobley starting to stretch the ranges, that you really need guys around Darius Garland and those non-shooters who can just shoot the lights out. And we saw Agbaji put shots up in summer league. They did so many pin downs for him. He's very active off ball, tons of movement. He's about 6'5", pushing 6'6", so definitely on the smaller side. A lot of questions on, hey, is he a 2? Is he a 3? But I really liked what I saw out of him, and I like the prospect of pairing him with the guys the Cavs have. I think potentially, depending on how camp goes and stuff too, this is a guy that could take some minutes from some vets like Jetty Osman, from Lamar Stevens, from an Isaac Okoro standpoint. We're still waiting on that jumper to develop, and Isaac is a phenomenal defender. He'll be coming to his 3rd year in the league, but still needs to develop that 3-point shot. But again, I think for what was available to the Cavs, I definitely think he's a high character guy too, a guy who's motivated, who's passionate, who, is just, in it to grind and to prove himself. So, Martin, what did you think about the pick?
Yeah, I don't have that much to add to what you did say. I did really thought that Malachi was going to go to Cleveland because he was available, and for like the homer pick and all the talk late winter of Malachi rising up to potentially being a top 10 pick, and then he doesn't go until 20th. So that was one of my surprises that he quote unquote dropped from all the pre-draft hype. But I thought they were going to go that way. But I think it was also a good pick because I did watch Ajabi. I mean, I watched him play at Kansas a lot because Kansas was who I picked to win the national title. So I was watching them a lot as well. So I don't think that was a bad pick. Evan, I was going to ask you about Mr. Diop, Diop. Any relation to the former Cavalier?
Sagana Diop, no, they actually asked him at his press conference. So he was one of the picks at the end. I question why they do these things. Again, they brought him up. He was the only guy available in the country, I think, at the time to, on a quick notice, be a part of the initial press conference. So we heard from this young man, and like the Cavs had no plans to even put him in summer league. He clearly is a drafting stash, and hey, if we move players and stuff around, our front court gets light, like we could bring him over, kind of thing. Same thing with New Zealander Luke Travers. We ended up playing for our summer league team too, and then again doing the hey, we're going to draft Giannis's brother move and grab Isaiah Mobley with our fourth pick in the second round, and actually signed him to a two-way deal. So he played for us in summer league too, but no relation. But I just feel bad they propped him up there and asking questions about what do you feel your skill set is and everything else, and everybody and their brother knew this dude wasn't going to dribble a basketball for us in 2022.
And then there was also but there was a relation in one of the picks, Isaiah Mobley, who was related to the person who should have won Rookie of the Year.
Yes, Isaiah stayed in school, thought about coming out, ended up staying another year, and kind of was the pinpoint person. Obviously, his dad being a coach on USC's team, heavy hand in his development. And we got to see him play in summer league a little bit. Definitely struggled, I think, with whereas at college he could step out and hit 3-pointers. In a short sample size in summer league, he was really struggling, and at times I felt he was just chucking. His field goal percentage, I think, heading into the final game was like 30-some% for a 6'9" guy, which is just awful. But he's got good nose around the basket, be a force down there, a polished passer, similar to what Evan is. But yeah, so he'll be for sure on the Cavs roster for one of their two-way deals heading into the season.
And then there was one more draft pick that the Cavs did make. They had 4 picks. Evan, do you want to talk about Mr. Luke?
Yeah, Luke. So Luke Travers, again, a New Zealand guy, came over and he looks at a lot of comps to Billy from Stranger Things. Got the mullet going on and the stash look. And, again, I think Abaji had said in an interview of like, I think a lot of people look at Luke Travers and say, this dude can't play basketball. And he's got kind of, some quirky movement to him and everything else, but he did play for us in summer league. And I mean, he could hit, I think, a couple shots from deep. So he's got the ability there. But what I really was impressed with was his basketball IQ, Martin. I mean, some of the threads in the needle he was making in transition, like he looked like early Larry Bird out there, scaled back in terms of actual talent to G League. He'd catch you off guard with stuff like that. So I definitely feel like, and I feel like at this point Luke knows this, is like Luke won't make the team this year, but I think he's definitely in contention to maybe come over next year, depending on how the roster stuff shakes out. The Cavs are capped right now and still haven't re-signed Colin Sexton, so they have no room whatsoever anywhere unless they start getting in on as a 3-way team to help facilitate a big player move in somewhere and can send along a player or two to open up a spot. But that's kind of where he's at right now. But again, I was really impressed with what I saw with Luke in summer league. I think most people were too.
With these 4 picks and knowing what we already have on the team, what would you grade the Cavs draft?
That's a tough one. I mean, I definitely think it's all yet to be determined, right? Because these young men haven't played a basketball game. But I think for where they were drafting, who's available in terms of health and guys that meet their timeline, and 22-year-old Abaji, and not going above and beyond selling the farm to move up, either into the deeper in the first round lottery order further up the list, or trying to trade back in. That they didn't give up future assets. They're kind of playing with house money with that first round pick that they really traded for Karis LeVert. That didn't end up conveying because Kobe made it lottery protected, thankfully. So we get a really great player who can shoot and shoot off the dribble and add some depth in Abaji, and then you get some other pieces for maybe 2-3 years down the road too, depending on how things bounce out. So I'd probably say a B+ or A-.
Okay. It's always hard to grade these things because, like you said, we've not seen them in regular season play. And then obviously, like the experts put like, a D-, C-, C+, B. But it's like if you come back 10 years from now and one of these people is a contributing double-digit scorer, double-digit rebounder, and like that's how I feel like you really know. So I feel like with drafts, you can't grade them until you get like a sample size of like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think Abaji is going to be in the league a while. Again, injuries will play a part, and we don't know who that's going to affect yet in any draft pick. But
right.
I definitely see a lot of Danny Green potential in him.
Okay.
Potentially better. I think he's a better athlete than Danny was and is in terms of being able to attack the basket, and I think he has some tools defensively that could elevate him above that. And then the ceiling is his for being able to get his own shot and stuff. So, Martin, we go from pick 14 to, before we start identifying some folks that just to have a comment or two on other than the draft. Let's go to the number 1 overall pick, where I think just about everybody thought it was between Chet. Thought Jabari Smith was going to end up going number 1, and then we see the Woj tweets like 10, 15 minutes before the pick comes out that Paolo Banchero from Duke is your number 1 pick from the Magic. So one, I think that shocked a lot of people, and rightfully so. The Magic franchise has been looking for that star for forever. They really haven't had much draft success since Dwight Howard. I do like the Franz pick, in the last year or 2 years out of Michigan, but Paulo goes number 1. They never worked him out. And there's been a lot of questions, and you're like, well, did Powell even want to go there? Is that why he refused to work out? Did they not tender it? Magic front office has been playing it off like, we kind of knew what we were getting with him, and just didn't materialize. I'm like, it's the number 1 overall pick in the draft. What do you mean it didn't materialize? It's like get Mercedes from Carvana delivered to your house and you haven't even sat in the driver's seat. Like, I just don't get that, Martin. So I think in our talking, that shocked you too.
Yeah, I did not have Pablo going number 1. I really just didn't. I thought it was going to be Jabari Smith Jr., and I thought Chet was going to be after that. But hey, I mean, I don't like the falling in our lap thing, like you said, because like you have the number 1 pick, you control the whole draft.
Yeah, it's not like you're playing. It's not like you need to hide who you're going to go with, like from anybody. Nobody picks ahead of you. Like you set the tone. I mean, I think I was surprised in the fact that all the buzz was Jabari, but I was not surprised in terms of talent. I actually like the pick because I think Paolo is the best player in this draft. I think I said that on the last pod too.
You did.
Again, I just think he commands, so mumuch attention defensively. What he's able to do and produce from playmaking standpoint to the being able to get his own shot, especially from the elbows. Like he's got a little bit of kind of old school Kevin Love to him in some extent, but I think he's an incredibly dynamic player. We saw in Summer League him produce for the 2 games or so he played at a high level, most notably going head to head with Jabari. But no, I mean, I'm not surprised in terms of talent because I think he's worthy of the number 1 pick. But yeah, I mean, that was all the tea leaves, all the reports, all the everything pointed in Jabari's direction there.
Like you said about the Magic, they truly haven't been relevant since Dwight left. And I'm looking at the Ringers big board, and they said he has shades of Chris Webber and Julius Randle. I don't know if I mean, Chris is obviously was a phenomenal player and all of that, and Julius has been doing well for himself, most improved, all that. But I don't know if that's going to get your team over the hump with the roster you currently have constructed.
Yeah, so I mean they got rid of Aaron Gordon and in the last 2 years. You know, they got rid of Vucevic. You know, they've done some movement there. They acquired Markel Fultz, who's rebounded a little bit. You know, I think definitely a viable, you know, scoring guard. Not, you know, where they thought he was going to be as a number one pick, you know, in the Jason Tatum draft. But, you know, again, with you got Franz Wagner, you know, they've re-signed Bamba. You've got Paolo in the fold now that, you know, I mean, it's a team that's got to play a bunch of young guys, Cole Anthony, you know, and continue to develop and continue to get them to buy in and night out and get some NBA miles under their belt, you know, as they try to grow and get some cohesion there. So, I mean, they're a young rebuilding team, and young rebuilding teams need high profile offensive weapons, and that's exactly what they got in Paulo. So, you know, I definitely think they'll be back towards the top of the lottery again next year. But, you know, again, that's just how you do is you take your lumps and you got to hit on some picks, and hopefully Paulo's one for them. So, Martin, outside of that, who are three players or three topics from the draft that kind of surprised you here real quick as we sum things up from the draft?
Well, I guess
let's just kind of go back and forth.
All right. So one of them I did already say I didn't think Malachi would drop to 20. But since I already said that, I will go to the other Buckeye. I didn't think he was not going to get picked in the first round because he was projected to be a first round pick. And I did see him dropping that low with EJ Liddell.
Yeah, and then the awful news with the ACL tear, and he won't play likely in this upcoming year. Just awful. But that was a slide. I mean, again, he's just, if you watched him like we did, game in and game out, Ohio State, I mean, that's just a winning guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've seen other instances where, like, let's use our hometown bias and say, like, man, I can see Aaron Kraft connecting at the NBA level. He's just a winning dude.
Yeah.
You know, you think college football with Tim Tebow, just a winning dude. Like, but, you know, EJ's got a lot of skill to him. He's gone back and really been a consistent three-point shooter, particularly spot on at the top of the arc. And then that lethal little turnaround thing he has. I mean, he's definitely undersized for the power forward spot, but I mean, he's just a crafty guy. Again, I see him as, you know, potentially definitely a Taj Gibson-like player with range. You know, maybe not as the strongest guy in the gym, you know, in the post, but you know, a 3-4 kind of, you know, Julius Randle type too that can, you know, certainly be productive for a team. But just awful ACL news. I was surprised by that too.
What was one that you were surprised by?
For me, because I want to dunk on him so hard because they're the Sacramento Kings, but them taking Keegan Murray ahead of Jaden Ivey. We only got to see like a quarter and a half out of Jaden Ivey, but I'm like, I mean, so many people try to get up and get number 4, you know, to get Jaden Ivey, knowing that Smith, Holmgren, and Banchero were going to go 1, 2, 3 in some order. Jaden's just so explosive, just a blur to the rim. I mean, he just, the potential there is amazing, but got injured and, you know, just out of abundance of caution, they didn't bring him back in the game, or it wasn't worthwhile to play him in the rest of summer league. So, you know, that surprised me that the Kings went Keegan Murray, but I don't think it's as big as a, you know, by any means, Kings not drafting Luka and taking Marvin Bagley instead. Like, we're not in that territory because Keegan Murray can flat ball, man. I don't know if you watched some of his summer league at all, but I mean, guy had, I think, at least 3 20-point games, can stroke it from 3, long, and kind of got that Tatum-like length to him. And then very much like he's got kind of like the Kawhi demeanor where like you never see an expression on his face, mad or whatever. The dude just plays, he just balls. Only had one scholarship offer, I think, coming into, you know, eventually going to Iowa with his brother. And guy just elevated from his first year to his second year. Phenomenal scorer in the Big Ten. I definitely think the Kings got a guy there. But the Ivy pick slid a little bit. So, you know, again, I kind of like some of the moves the Kings have made recently. But again, like I don't know. Like I still think both are going to be good players. Like it could be not to the scale of a Trey and Luka, but I think 3 years down the road, you might still want Ivy over Murray. But I think we could be heading towards where it's a little closer than what I originally thought. So that was a surprise there. The Kings didn't take Ivy that everybody wanted it for. How about you for your number 2?
So speaking of jaded, I was just like him going to Detroit. It's interesting to me because obviously Detroit had the number 1 pick last year and they took Cade Cunningham. So now you have something where, if all else, you potentially have your backcourt for the foreseeable future with Jade and Ivy. Because to me, maybe just we talked about Homer glasses. I mean, I watch a lot of Big Ten basketball, and Jaden Ivey was the bane of OSU's existence for the time he was at Purdue. So I know how good he is. So him and Cade, it's like if they get a potential good big man, maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the road, they could be in for a playoff spot. Because once you have your backcourt in this league, filling out the rest is kind of easier. But that's what I was interested in, just thinking how him and Cade are going to play together.
Yeah, Mark. Do you have was that you technically a second one? Or you got another second?
I got another second one. I just want to talk about Jaden since he is a Big Ten guy. But then when you go down with the Pelicans, number 8, Dyson Daniels. Only reason I really want
on that kid.
Yeah, I like him too. The only reason too I want to highlight him is obviously he came from the G League Ignite from Australia, and he was the first player picked in the draft from a G League team. And then you have the
Jaden Hardy.
Yep. And then you also
Beauchamp.
Oh yeah, so it's cool seeing like those G League picks like start to come up. So just wanted to highlight him. And the Pelicans, I mean, they
got some studs, man. They got some horses.
Yeah, and then like obviously we talked about them getting EJ, and they're really good. Obviously, they made the McCollum trade. They got Brandon Ingram. We joked about him because we're like, how are you hurt doing 360s standing up? Zion's coming back, which there's something I do want to ask you when we get to the free agency KD part about Zion. But that team, I really like the Pelicans, man. Maybe because I'm a real Brandon Ingram fan of how he's improved once he got off of LA. But they were out there drafting, and I really liked all their picks.
I don't think they're done yet. I don't know what the move is just yet, but assuming Zion can play basketball, let's assume Zion can play basketball again.
He better. They paid him,
and he better because they paid him. Yeah, a gamble of a payment in my eyes, but again, I think they've got so many pieces, and Dyson Daniels, I think, is going to be a huge next step in that too. So, I mean, you got to worry about how you're going to get playing time to all these guys. I just feel like they're loaded at every position with young players mixed with vets, and such as Larry Nance too. I mean, beyond all the superstars, filling out the ends of the roster. That again, I really like Dyson Daniels. He's long. He's 6'7", 6'8" I believe. Just great defensively, really kind of rose. Again, to be the top one over Jaden Hardy, who is kind of the dessert of sorts on the team that everybody's looking forward to making the next level. But I think for me, my number 2 selection here, I'm going to start. There's a couple. I mean, easy spots. I already talked about being high on Tyrese, but I want to go into the second round where there's some guys in Summer League that popped out, and like you might see these guys kind of really blossom here as the season progresses on. And my first is actually the last pick of the first round, Peyton Watson out of UCLA. So he was traded to Denver on draft night. Only averaged 4 points and 3 rebounds. But, I mean, he's a 6'8" forward who can who can run the pick and roll, and just really performed well in Summer League, I think. I mean, he could pull up and He was just chucking threes and, laying them in like layups. Like, that's a guy I could really see kind of expand things and really do well for Denver. So that's my number 2. Martin, who's your number 3 storyline or person from the draft?
I feel like every draft you can go to the Knicks because the Knicks did get the first overseas international player from the New Zealand Breakers. And ever since, I guess, I don't know how far you want to go back, but when
they traded him.
Yeah. And then they traded him. So I just want to talk. They traded to OKC, who OKC has more draft picks than God knows what. So I don't know what the Knicks are doing, man. Like every draft, I'm like, oh, the Knicks are always hyped for the draft, and then they do something. I'm like, what are you guys doing? So that is my third, like WTF, New York Knicks. Please explain.
So I think as a part of the deal, I think they got 2 firsts out of it. So, again, that's potential assets in the war chest to go big game hunting like they've tried to do and failed at miserably since they put all their chips in when they didn't get LeBron or Wade or Bosh, and they gave Amari Sotomayor a Brinks truck. But I think my final piece here, my final discussion point from the draft, I think it just generally is our friend Byron's Oklahoma City Thunder. So in addition to, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and some of the young studs they've got coming up, you've got Chet now, who really performed well defensively in Summer League, was a block monster. Cash in 2 of their Jillian first round picks for the Knicks to move up and get the giant question mark in the draft, Ousmane Dieng. Again, just a really raw, 6'10" prospect that shows you some shades of, hey, this could be a Michael Porter like guy at some point, but he's still got the baby fat on him. He's still again, not quite even grown into his frame that everybody's projecting him to grow into. So you've got those folks there, and again, I really love the Jalen Williams pick out of Santa Clara. So I mean, they're stocked with young guys. I mean, this is the end all. Hey, if you're going to trade everything away and get all these assets and picks, at a certain point, these picks become players if you don't use them to retool and get a superstar or get some established talent. And now you got to find room, alongside Josh Giddey's of the world too, to go out, perform, and grow them. And we're going to see a team that gets up and down. And I wouldn't be surprised if this Oklahoma City team, they're going to lose. I think they're still going to lose games, but I think they're going to score a lot. I think they're going to. I mean, I would not be surprised if, hey, like you get Milwaukee on a back-to-back and it's like a 130, 129 game kind of thing. Like, I think they have the kind of raw chuck it, talent to go out and do that. So that's my third one, Martin. Oklahoma City.
The good old Thunder. Evan, man, let's transition from the draft to then talk about free agency. And let's get the elephant out of the room. The biggest thing of free agency was out of nowhere, Kevin Durant requested for a trade. We're still at July 17th, 2022, time of recording. He hasn't been traded. This was shocking to a lot of people. What did you think when you saw that news?
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked. It was interesting. There was so much discussion on Kyrie, and he was granted permission to go out and try to find a sign and trade. Partner obviously couldn't do it. His agent's floating out there. We got multiple teams interested. Bull crap. He ended up opting in, taking his money, opting into that next part of the deal, get the security. And like the ink wasn't dry on the paper, and Kevin Durant's like, "Yeah, I don't want to deal with that cat." Like, what? I mean, I'm just surprised. So there's so many different things here, right? So I think rightfully Brooklyn should be mad. I think NBA ownership should be mad. I mean, Kevin's got 4 years left on his deal, requesting a trade out. Like, it's absolutely astounding to me. I mean, contracts mean nothing anymore. to just try to force your way out. And this was on the eve of free agency on July 1, so I can't remember if this came out the 30th or it came out early in the day on the 1st. And we're now at July 17th, and there's been no movement, anything like that. I'm sure teams are interested, but so with Kevin, I mean, I don't know. I think it's player empowerment, sure, yeah, but like at a certain point, if you sign your name on the dotted line to go play somewhere for 4 years, like I get that we're in this new world where, hey, with 2 years left or a year left, you can like tell people I ain't gonna re-sign if you're Anthony Davis. You might as well get what you can from me now. Those kinds of things. But with 4 years left, like who does that? And then two, like you chose Brooklyn. Like you left Golden State to go to Brooklyn and make them sign DeAndre Jordan, who hasn't been able to play competitive basketball in 10 years, to a deal, and get Kyrie Irving out there and disrupt your locker room. And, again, and then to give up the, what's left of the farm to go get your buddy James Harden. And you're left with this giant implosion. And, a lot of it can be said about, again, this is, Kyrie's fault and Terrell Owens of basketball and locker room cancer and, everything else. But like they get Brook in part, there's a blame on Brooklyn too, because like you coddled this environment. Like there's always that fine line to walk between, hey, we want to check in with the players and see what they want to do. But I mean, it seems like they just let two dudes come in, gave them the keys to the Lambo, the G-Wagon, and the 3 mansions, and then they trashed it all. And now they're like, yeah, dog, we're sorry about that, but we're going to leave. Like, it's tough because you don't instill the values and the discipline necessary to win titles and build a culture when you just give it all to the players like that. But, like, it's frustrating because, again, like, Kevin chose this. Kevin was behind all of this. And I get that Kyrie Irving has destroyed most of it probably, but at the end of the day, Kevin's the one doing this. So, I mean, it's not going to look pretty. The history books are not going to look good on this. Like, you start to see the memes start to make the rounds and stuff of, hey, like, LeBron James has changed teams a lot of times. But you know what LeBron James has done? He's never asked out early from his contract. Mm-hmm. He's won a title at every stop he's been at. Like, I think Kevin hides in the shadow of that, and Kevin's legacy is going to be in the shadow of that. He wanted to get out of the Steph Curry shadow and everything else, and now you're in this improbable spot where, everybody's waiting on there to be some news about some team that comes forward and gets Kevin Durant. Well, like, Brooklyn knows what they have in him as an asset, right? Like, they know that you don't just get, depending on, health in the year and stuff. Like, I all think the Ringer did a top however many, like, trade value list, and, like, they had Giannis number 1. If you, as in, like, to be in the top 5 spot, if you get a call, we're hanging up the phone. Like, you get a call, like, saying we want to trade and inquire Giannis, you're hanging up the phone, you don't care. Like, Giannis is still number 1 in that respect, like, in terms of trade value, and so that way you can kind of, put talent to scale. But Kevin Durant is certainly, top 5 asset potentially that, like, is in that same discussion, right? So, like, in order to get Kevin, you're going to have to give up the farm. And then if you have Kevin, suddenly you have no resources, no assets, no picks for years to build anything around him, and he's going to be unhappy again. Like, the only way Kevin gets to a spot he wants to be at is through playing out his contract and signing somewhere. Like, I just don't, and that's part of that's on him. If you want to get to this spot, you shouldn't have signed for as long as you did. Like, there's so many different layers to it, but those are the nuts and bolts of my thoughts, I guess, Martin. Again, is just they're in this impossible spot. And, if I'm Brooklyn, I got the dude under contract for 4 years. Everybody's waiting to see in the background right now about his teammate, Ben Simmons, who is going to arbitration, trying to get his, like, $20 million back from just taking his ball and going home and not playing for the Sixers. And depending on how the legal system, not the league, the legal system says that, hey, you either got to pay this man or don't, if it bodes in well the employer for an employee he didn't show up, I don't know if Kevin would do that. I do think Kevin has higher values than Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving in terms of reporting the work. But say he did, Brooklyn knows what they have. The value on the cars are going to go down per se, but like they are in no rush, or should they be, to offload Kevin freaking Durant. So that's my spiel. Okay.
The only things I really want to add or piggyback off of, you already said the LeBron thing. Like everywhere he's traded, he's always finished his deals. He's went to different teams. He's won titles. We've already talked on this podcast as much as a great player, one of the greatest of all time, yada, yada, yada. When he does leave the team, that he goes to a different team, that other team is in shambles. It is what it is. But Kevin, I've gotten to a point, man, where like the stuff I do on a daily basis always is about timing and not thinking of coincidences. There's always a pattern, and there's something. The fact that he requested a trade a couple like weeks after Golden State won the title, and everyone was on Durant should never left Curry. That rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know if I'm the only one, but it's like you left that team. They're getting the glory for winning a fourth title. Now you're taking the headlines away because you want to get a trade, which is weird because people are saying that Golden State might be an option for the trade, which that's a whole other.
That's just. I think that's just conjecture, but you're right. Yeah,
I don't think that's happening either. And with this trade, man, I don't think that Kevin Durant's a leader. I don't. Like, I'm at that point now. Like, Russell Westbrook was leading OKC. Steph Curry led Golden State. You come to Brooklyn, and it's you and Kyrie, who you wanted. Like, you wanted Kyrie there, and then everything happened, and then it's weird because, like, they haven't traded Kyrie or anything like that, and he was supposed to be playing for him. So I don't know how much talk he had with Kevin when Kevin was like, hey, I'm going to request a trade. And Kevin really has been quiet about that since. He's been doing his random Kevin Durant tweets. But, yeah, I don't like it, especially with so many years on your contract, because I'm getting to the point, too, is like, why do we even give 4 or 5 year contracts? Like, I'm at that point now. Like, if we're going to do this whole after 4 years, you can leave. All right. From now on, we should just be given like 1 year contracts at a time. Like that's what we should be doing.
Yeah. There's so many different layers to this. You know, I think my July 6th, 17th prediction is that Kevin is not going to be traded before the season starts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because again, like Brooklyn doesn't owe him that.
Mm-hmm.
They gave him the bag, man, for 4 years. Like, for 4 more years. So like, I just don't, and two, I mean, they went out in a head scratching move. Like they had to have known these things were in the works, and they go out and they spend a first round pick on Royce O'Neal from Utah, who's a really good 3-and-D player. Like why go out and get a caliber player like that if you think they're going to be in the garbage? And like, meanwhile, there's just the NBA it's so much drama. Like it's fun. So like, meanwhile, you got, your folks down there, you got Raphael Stone down there in Houston rubbing his fingers together, like looking at a nice juicy steak because they got all Brooklyn's picks in the James Harden trade. And it's, if it all implodes and they have to offload Durant and Irving and they're gross, guess who gets all those picks? Unprotected, I believe. Like,
yeah, it's also showing that Harden was right. Harden was right to leave.
Yeah.
And I give that man a lot of crap, and I really do. But he was right to leave that place.
He was right to leave that place. And I don't know. I mean, we could go on and on about the Brooklyn scenario. I still think we're headed towards an inevitable. Brooklyn can't come back to the season with Kyrie Irving on the roster, and the Lakers can't come back with Russell Westbrook on the roster, who LeBron can't even say hi to at the same summer league game. Like they're out. And Russ fired his agent, who's been with him his entire career allegedly, because he was trying to get him to come back and play ball with the Lakers and buy in and everything else. And Russ was like, no, I'm not doing that. So I think you've got two untradeable assets that nobody else in the league wants, and you're going to trade a poo-poo platter for a poo-poo platter on different ends there, and that's what that's going to end up. I think is get Westbrook in Brooklyn, or maybe even do a third team with cap space if you send picks there. Brooklyn just doesn't want them. The Spurs have been rumored to be a spot like that. They've got some money available. But, Martin, that's enough. Let's move on to some other free agency news on that side of things. I want to start real quick with James Harden. So, James Harden, again, traded to in the Ben Simmons move, traded to Philadelphia. We've seen a rapid decline of James Harden, correct, in the last few years.
Mm-hmm. I will say the reason for that is guy gets big when he wants to trade, and then he skinnies up real quick and loses his step. I mean, one of my favorites of actors of all time, Christian Bale, goes super for those roles he's in. It's not healthy, and Harden's been doing that, so that's not healthy.
Yeah, he's not in good shape. Allegedly, he's been in working hard. He's talking about shedding pounds and trying to get back to where he was and everything else. But I think the most important move, so he re-signed with Philadelphia, but how he did it, I got to commend him for is, he could have opted into the final year of his deal that would have paid him, I think, north of $46 or $47 million. He declined it to re-sign for about $14 million less. $14 million is still a lot to NBA players. They all have buku bucks. They all have deals on the side. They all are getting money in from China, from tours and everything else that they do over there, and tons of other supplemental income. But he turned down $14 million so they could go out and give 3 years to PJ Tucker for some reason. He's going to be 40 and 10 a year. So, I just commend him for trying to help the team and do that, because that's not a James Harden-like move we'd see, man. So that's my first piece out of Philadelphia. And, again, so they've added PJ Tucker, and then I really like that they went out and got DeAnthony Melton from Memphis. And I don't know why Memphis gave him up. I really like DeAnthony Melton, but I think that's a really good combo guard to come in who's, a key contributor to the Grizzlies team that, went as far as they did in the West last year, to the second round with the Dubs before Ja got hurt. So Philadelphia is my first topic. Martin, where do you want to take it next in terms of free agency news? Tons of places we can go.
Well, if I'm going to keep going down this road of people I've been hard on, obviously I will commend James for doing that, because that is not the James Harden I knew, and looks like he does want to win. So congrats to that. So let's go to another player who I am super hard on, going to a team I am super hard on, John Wall, the ultimate money bag securer, is going to the Los Angeles Clippers. And when I didn't care at all. And then we go to watching his interview where he said, now the third best defender has to guard me. They're going to be in trouble, acting like he is the same John Wall from Washington. And I just laughed because he's not, unless I'm proven wrong, he is not good from the past couple of years I've seen. So the fact that this move was hyped up at all is laughable. But yeah, John Wall to the Clippers.
I don't know what we're getting out of him either, right? Because I mean, he took his paychecks, and the Rockets said we're not going to pay you when they got off with the Westbrook contract. But he was really productive in DC, man. Like even before the trade, like he had a really good year. Still a high assist guy. Now you've got two guys. Even he's just a passer, and he isn't so much of a scorer anymore. I still think this guy can produce and contribute. So I'm going to zag a little bit and say, hey, I'm curious. I think with the Clippers being handcuffed to an extent financially, I saw some crazy Ballmer number the other day of like what getting the tax means for him and everything else, and like it was something like if he lost, I don't know, like if he lost 1% of Microsoft stock that he owns, that's like, I don't know, that's like $600 million or something. The numbers aren't quite right. And like when you're talking about the tax, like in the tax, I think where you get an luxury tax of about like 150 million now, like where you'd have to pay like double that and essentially have a $300 million payroll. It means nothing to him. Like he'll go out and pay above and beyond and stuff. So I'm glad John Wall at least, because that's got to suck to an extent on a personal level, right? Of like right, wrong, and different. And that's, what happens when you sign these big contracts and teams feel like, oh, we got to pay our hometown guy to keep him, like Washington did. But, because at a certain point, you could be shelved like that and shelved with Westbrook, where people don't want to play you. They want to pay you to not play for them. But I'm curious, like, throw them in there. Like, they're handcuffed. The Clippers couldn't do much with how much they're paying Paul George and Kawhi and folks around them. So, yeah, I like it.
I mean, they will be back.
Again, he could be a dud. He hasn't played basketball in 2 years too. So you're right. I mean, like, it's a roll of the dice. But I think it's one the Clippers are apt to try.
Yeah, we'll see, man. It's just because I've that guy, he has irritated me. I have gone on record. I've called him Johnny Tubbs before when he got out of shape. I absolutely exploded on him when he got hurt dancing at one of his parties. And obviously, like, there's some other stuff, but I'll leave that be. So we'll see if he's half of what prime Washington John Wall was, then the Clippers got to steal, because obviously they're going to be back next year. As much as I mean, they got Kawhi and they got my best friend Paul George. So we'll see. Evan, what other?
Let's go to more.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let's go to more recent news. So, because we've been kind of playing catch up to this point. So, heading into the weekend, we've been monitoring this. There's been 2 restricted free agents on the market we've been watching. One is one Colin Sexton for the Cleveland Cavaliers, who wants to get somewhere north of $20 million a year, starting guard money. And he and the Cavs can't find it. So he's going to restricted free agency to see if the team matches. If you're unfamiliar with restricted free agency, basically you can go out and receive an offer from a different club, but ultimately you're a restricted free agent. So the team can go out and match. So if Martin and I couldn't come to terms on Martin's next contract on this podcast, and he goes out and signs with another group, but he's a restricted free agent, all I got to do is say, I'll match those same terms dollar for dollar, year for year, and then Martin has to come back and sign with me, basically. So that's where we're at with Colin Sexton. But DeAndre Ayton, so we've talked about, could that have been a Gobert piece?
Yes, we have.
And we'll touch on that in a second. Because we knew that there's going to be some movement there. So DeAndre Ayton signs an offer sheet with the Indiana Pacers, one of 2 teams essentially with cap room left. It's them and San Antonio. The Pistons had some money, but through some trades with the Knicks and some other things, that signing Marvin Bagley, that's all but kind of gone up. So they throw the max in them, 4 years, and the Suns match it. So why would the Suns go through all this? I think essentially Ayton was pushing for that 5th year, so they got a 5th year. They didn't have to pay Ayton, but ultimately they didn't want to lose the asset. So I don't know that I've ever seen a team match so quickly for a young pick like that, former number 1 overall pick. But I was kind of looking forward to seeing DeAndre Ayton in Indiana to an extent, but he will remain with the Phoenix Suns. So, Martin, back to the Gobert thing.
I want to say, hold on, Evan, hold on.
Yeah.
Want to stay with the Pacers, though, and the Ayton thing, because we both said that Ayton was going to be out of there. He got benched in that Game 7 annihilation against the Mavs, and we've talked about another when I'm like going to the Mavs because they need a big guy and all that. But I do want to say with Indiana, because Malcolm Brogdon, he is going to Boston, and I think that is a big move.
I think so too. So they got off that contract for Indiana. Obviously, Boston was hurt without another ball handler down the stretch, and all the turnovers that Tatum had, and Smart trying to facilitate more than he ought to, and same thing with White. But I really like the pickup there too. And the Celtics were a byproduct of another move too. They have Danilo Gallinari as another guy who could give them some, give Brown and Tatum some spells during the regular season. I don't know how much you're able to play him defensively into the playoffs, but the stretch big, being able to step out and hit threes. He was cut from San Antonio after San Antonio received a Godfather offer for one DeJounte Murray from Atlanta, which they gladly accepted. They are all in on the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes for next year's draft, the San Antonio Spurs. So a couple different pieces there. Yeah, I think the Celtics absolutely improved this offseason at getting proven vets in Brogdon and Gallinari. I think they could still use some depth, maybe with some buyout guys or what have you. And I really like their final pick in the draft, Martin, too. I think he really balled out. That would be, where is he? J.D. Davison from Alabama. Mm-hmm. That's another name to watch. I almost included him in my 3. I mean, he had 20-some the other night, too. Like, dude can flat score, too. So you've got that. So the Hawks, put a defensive-minded guard on the opposite side of Trey. And a high-profile name. The guy was almost a walking triple-double last year, DeJounte Murray, all-star. I think the East is definitely adding more weapons, and it's becoming more of an arms race once again.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we highlighted that because obviously a team who we know the story. A lot of people, I mean, even including us to an extent, had them dead in the water because they were 11th. And then they were the final nail in the coffin in the Brooklyn Nets, sweeping them and then making it to the NBA Finals, taking the Warriors to 6. So when the the runners-up improve, got to highlight it. And I don't think they may not be done. But
they might not be. So I guess just staying on the East train here, I also kind of like some of the moves Milwaukee's made. I really like them drafting Marjon Beauchamp. From the G League Ignite, long defender, can shoot threes, had a fairly productive summer league, but also so they re-signed Bobby Portis for good money. They needed to retain him, and then also they made a little bit of an investment on a guy coming off an ACL tear and one Joe Ingles. I think that absolutely adds to their depth. Another person to kick it out to, and he'll be asked to do, I think, a lot less other than just kind of catch and shoot and stuff. And he's a very, very capable defender for his size and skill set, and, not having as much foot speed as other guys. But I really like that move. I mean, you don't expect him back probably to February, March, but heading to the playoffs. I think Joe Ingles on the Bucks is a great move too.
Yeah, I agree. And, keeping Bobby Portis, I love that. When he tweeted the 4 more years, loved it.
Are we going to talk about Minnesota?
We have to. I mean, to quote one of WrestleMania 31, Michael Cole, when Seth Rollins came down to cash in, the heist of the century. This was the heist of the century for the Utah Jazz because they got more than I ever anticipated. And I know you were just utterly flabbergasted when we were talking about this whole situation. So Evan, go ahead.
Where to start, man? So first off, you've got former Boston Celtics exec retiree Danny Ainge doing this again, pulling the heist of the century, fleecing the Brooklyn Nets for all their draft capital that they'd used to get Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and you name it, for his older aging superstars at the time. He retired, left Boston, and then his good buddy buys the Utah Jazz, and he's coming back and he's running that. So he snags Will Hardy as a prime assistant off Boston's coaching staff this year. And then he starts listening to offers. I think we are expecting a Donovan Mitchell trade at some point too. But, I mean, these are like Paul George and Kawhi level returns for a guy you're going to be paying $50 million to in the next, 2-3 years he has left, in Rudy Gobert. So Karl Anthony Towns, we found out we've heard it over and over, but this move says Karl Anthony Towns really does not like to play center, even though he's 7 foot. So you now have him. They're kind of doing the Cavs West thing with the jumbo lineup, but I just can't fathom of how many picks and pick swaps and to get Walker Kessler, their first round pick this year, 7-footer. So essentially, you've got him as a first rounder. I think they gave up 4 picks too. I can't remember how many. I think all of them are unprotected. I got to start looking up some of the details, but I'm just dumbfounded that if you're Minnesota, who are you bidding against to pay that amount of money to? And of course, Danny Ainge would pull this off because the guy always overvalues his assets and everything else. And every once in a while, a sucker's born every day. So you've also got the working dynamics of Timberwolves that you've got kind of this weird like onboarding. I'm still not quite sure, Martin, how this works, but for those unfamiliar, Alex Rodriguez's group, MLB All-Star, 600 home run club Alex Rodriguez, has purchased the Minnesota Timberwolves. But there's like this weird exit stage where there's like onboarding of like, well, Alex Rodriguez's team are on like training for the next 2 years and they get full reigns of the franchise. So like, I'm not sure where this weird like internship thing came from, but obviously these guys had a hand in that decision. You see this all the time with new owners, right? They come in, they want to make a big splash. They want to put their stamp on it and be like, yep, the turnaround's because of me, and rarely does it work out. I think you and I have read enough about leadership stuff and things over the years to know that like anytime you're coming into a new leadership position, you need to figure out the landscape of people and culture and direction, history, and everything else for like 6, 7, 8 months before you make any big decisions.
Yep.
And this is yet another example of why it's a bad idea to try to expedite time. Time is needed for these things to come to fruition. So gross overpayment, I think they'll be productive. I think the Wolves will certainly be productive here. They also get slow-mo from Memphis, which I think is definitely good. Kyle Anderson, a proven vet to come into. Still think they'd like to move off D'Angelo's contract. The sky's the limit with Anthony Edwards. Like, this team's trending in a good direction. I think they'll be competitive. I think they'll be potentially could be a 4-3 seed. Do I see them, getting Gobert played off the court in the playoffs like he always does every single year by smaller guards? Yes, I do. Just an astounding overpayment. And like now you're like, if that's what Gobert commands, what is Kevin Durant going to command?
Well, Kevin is going to be, if that's what he commands, it's 10 first-round picks? So that's 10 years. That's a decade worth of picks, which I don't know if I'm doing that for anyone unless you're doing unless you really know you can win now, which injuries and all of that. I mean, I wouldn't have done this stuff for Rudy. I didn't see him going to Minnesota. Again, I thought he was going to go to Dallas, who Dallas have done really absolutely nothing because they've lost, which we talked about. We said Brunson was going to get big money just because of one series, and it happened. So I don't know what Dallas is doing, but just to say, I thought Gobert was going to go there.
Yeah, so the Jazz get Malik Beasley, capable guy, Patrick Beverly, capable guy, Leandro Balmero, salary filler, basically. Again, first-round pick Walker Kessler, Jared Vanderbilt, who I really liked, a 2023 first, 2025 first, 2026 pick swap, 2027 first, and 2029 first. There's no way in 2029 you're not going to regret that you gave all those things up. There's no way. And that's part of the thing too, right? Is if you're an NBA GM and you're playing these things out, making big swings, for a lot of these guys and these front office execs, you never have to live out the consequences of your own actions, right? Like, hey, if it works out, great. If not, these guys get recycled enough in the brotherhood of the NBA that, their family will be in another franchise by then, another city by then. So there's so many wrinkles to that. Yeah, to the Dallas point, yeah, I mean, they've lost. They picked up Christian Wood from Houston. I think definitely a really good pick and roll option for Luka, but you obviously need more than that. You need another ball handler. You need. They're still paying Tim Hardaway too much money. They definitely need more talent around them, and it's still got the 2003 to 2010 Cavs vibes of like, what are you putting around this megastar here? Saw a stat today on Luka of, he's 23, how many first team All-NBAs he has compared to other people. At 23, he already has more than Dwayne Wade. Would you believe that?
Hold on. Yes, I did see that stat, which stat is true.
Is it fake that I get duped?
No. You're right. The stat is true, but with those numbers and stuff, you got to put it in context because obviously, I mean, as long as we've been watching it, we knew back then it was super strict on your first team all selections because remember, Dwayne Wade was playing with prime Kobe. So he was never going to get first team all NBA shooting guard. That just wasn't going to happen while Kobe was there. And then because I saw like the Dallas Muse, they posted and said there's levels to this. And I was like, okay, let's not be disrespectful here. Dwayne Wade's third year in the NBA, to me, is probably the greatest third year of all time. Because that NBA Finals, when they were down 0-2 to those said Mavericks, and that Finals is one of the top 10 finals I have seen in my able to comprehend basketball lifetime.
He lit the world on fire. Great points, Martin.
Third greatest shooting guard of all time. So let's because I saw some Maverick people saying, "Oh yeah, that shows how much better Lucas and D Wade." And I was like, one, let's calm that down on that stat. Let's bring up the stuff in the finals. Obviously, Luka hasn't been there. D Wade is also the leading shot blocker for shooting guards, which is above Kobe, Black Mamba, Bean Bryant, and the Ghost in Chicago, who wears 23. We know him as Michael Jordan. So D-Wade plays both sides. Let's calm that down. If D-Wade Prime was playing like right now where it wasn't as physical because he was in the mid-2000s with LeBron and all them, it'd be different. But you were right on the stat. It's just I have to – people sometimes sleep on the third greatest shooting guard of all time.
We get ahead of ourselves a little bit. You're exactly right. But, again, the underlying point was the one you originally made of, what is Dallas doing this offseason? And they've now lost. Yeah, they lost Jalen Brunson. And again, I think if they move some money, maybe that could be a Colin Sexton destination where they offer him a high amount of money to say they got something. But Colin's coming off an ACL tear too. Like you don't know what you're not getting. So I don't know. We'll see on that front. But very, very interesting. Martin, looking across the landscape, obviously we've got the looming Westbrook and Kyrie thing we're waiting out on. I'm trying to rattle my head through different moves and stuff. There are a lot of players staying home, I think is maybe the last piece, because I think we've just about covered everything. There are a lot of players staying home and getting the bag. Obviously, the famed DG, the PG, Darius Garland, receiving the largest contract in NBA history. That's no slight to what the Cavs have given LeBron in the past. LeBron took a lot of short-term deals and took down mega money or turned down mega money over longer years because he wanted the flexibility and not be stuck somewhere like Kevin Durant is now. And also, too, the evolution of the NBA TV contracts and everything else. We're giving away record money now. Nikola Jokic is going to be a 260-some million a year, or not million a year, 260-some million over the course of contract player. Bradley Beal re-upped. He's going to be a 260-some plus player.
Also with
all that, it takes is one
bringing that up with Bradley.
Yeah,
I just want to say too, like from now on, that officially kills Bradley Beal going to somewhere else because this dude just re-ups with the Wizards every time. He's not leaving, guys. Let's just stop it. Never bring it up ever again. Carry on.
And same thing to do with his compatriot out west and Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard's not going anywhere either. He's also going to be paid. And two, you get into these structures, right, where, like, first off, I applaud guys that want to go in and say, I want my entire career to be all on one team. Because it's happening so infrequently anymore. So I applaud those guys because I think on the back end, they know that, hey, I'm going to get this money. I'm going to secure things for my family, everything else. This is a job. I like it enough here that, I think there's a high likelihood we're never going to win an NBA title, but I'm going to continue to give it my all. My hope is that I'm proven wrong, but I don't think Bradley Beal or Damian Lillard are going to win NBA titles on those franchises, until they, through their retirement. I don't think it's going to happen. And I think they know that, but I applaud guys that want to stick it out one place, want to invest in the community over and over. I heard Roger Bell talking on his podcast on Saturday about, again, he feels like, because he, a lot of people know him as a son. A lot of people know him as a member of the Utah Jazz. I think he played for another team somewhere in between two. He might have been on the Spurs at one point. But, he just feels – he talked about just kind of feeling homeless, right? He'd love to have a spot where, like people know you well around the community. Like, again, that like, people, you can still go to a barbecue or a country club and, 20 years after done playing, be like, that's Raja. Like, oh man, those 16s. Like, he feels like he moved enough that that's the case. And like, look at Kevin Durant too. Like, when he goes in the Hall of Fame, like, he's probably gonna wear a Golden State Warriors hat, but like, again, everybody's still gonna feel weird about that. When you move so many times, you're like homeless. But home is where those two guys have made it, and the Portland Trail Blazers and the Washington Wizards have made sure that they've supported that financially and quite literally given them the bag. Same thing with Jokic in Denver.
Yeah, I mean, the last superstars really, I mean, which actually defines like you and I's like era, obviously like LeBron and them, but Kobe, Tim Duncan, Dirk.
Dirk?
Yeah, Kobe, Tim Duncan, Dirk. All three stayed on the same team, whole careers, Hall of Famers, legendary players, champions. Like, we're not going to get that. I think the closest we'll get now is the people on the Warriors. Like, they will be the next, like, if they ever don't leave.
Yeah, and I think, that's the wrong example of, wrong as in like they're not going to be successful. I think that's more on ownership. But I want to pull up this quote from 2019 from Steve Kerr that Bill Simmons reshared today, talking about how Olympic basketball, right, and noticing that, hey, like, I saw some really good out of bounds plays. He basically said I really saw some out of bounds plays I really liked Australia's using back in 2012, and 10 years later they're still using the same out of bounds plays. And he goes, and he said that's with the same team. He's like, that's an advantage for folks like France, or for like Australia and Spain. When Spain went on to win that tournament, and he says you've got Rubio, Gasol, Rudy Fernandez, Sergio Llull, the usual suspects. It's a good reminder, Kerr says, of how important continuity is in the game, how beautiful it is when players know each other, know each other's tendencies. From an American standpoint, that's the fight we're up against. From a coaching standpoint, it's sort of confirmation of what I already believe. The sum of the parts is not as great as the total value you get from being together. So whether that's USA basketball on an international level or the Golden State Warriors, it matters when you know your teammates, their tendencies, their personalities on and off the court, and everything else. And while those three players are going to be mainstays, I think, in that next generation of Dirk and Kobe and Duncan that you've been speaking of, all this player movement and stuff, like, yeah, you can find lightning in the bottle, like it's like the 2019 Raptors. And, at a certain point, talent will beat really good talent, will beat, just talent in general when you got enough star power there. But, like, I think that's how that's why I think Golden State surprised everybody this year to a certain extent, is I think they really benefited from all these players playing together for as long as they have, the continuity piece, and where everybody else is just, a couple of years away from that. I think Boston's working their way towards that. They've been in conversations for 5 or 6 years, Eastern Finals, everything else. And at a certain point, the injuries, you never know, but you got to have that consistency piece there. I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, so I don't want to stay on too long since we've already eclipsed the hour mark. So just want to hit on a couple quick things, and then we will be back on another podcast talking about more NBA offseason as we're going to start getting ready for the season. So quick things. Evan, Portland, since we were talking about Damian Lillard, they won the Summer League championships. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first year they gave the Summer League champ rings. And the rings are nice, but for Summer League, what are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know. They were like all jumping over the table this afternoon. It just, like, I think it's a cool wrinkle to an extent, but it's a novelty. Like we're talking Summer League. Like, there might be 2 guys on this team that make the roster. Like, everybody's fighting for their lives, their careers, everything else that Summer League is. But, like, I don't know. I saw the one guy from the Cavs stream yesterday was talking about, man, if you win a Summer League ring and a NBA championship ring and a Team USA ring, an NCAA title ring, you're like collecting the basketball infinity stones.
Oh my gosh. Oh my Lord.
But again, I think it's a novelty. I don't think there's a lot of merit in it. I think, like, the current players don't care, obviously, because they wouldn't be in a position where they need to fight for their life for their next contract and play in a summer league. Like Kevin Durant wanted to play in a summer league again, those kinds of things. But like, I mean, I like that the NBA continues to try to find new things. You know, they've added in a new rule about getting free throw in position for take fouls behind the play, so players don't get hurt. Like, they're continuing to try to find and evolve basketball. They're going to get that play-in tournament at some point. CJ McCollum, the players president, was talking about that on a broadcast the other day. Like, they won't install it next year, but like the year after, they'll figure it out. Like, they're continuing to try to evolve basketball. And sometimes you take some, in all those swings, you're going to miss a couple times, and these wings are a miss.
Other thing, news, short thing, talk about like a summer league thing. LeBron made his return to the Drew League for the first time since the NBA lockout. Him and DeRozan, which you cleverly said, as he said, shout out to Debo, and obviously your last name is Debo. LeBron had like 42.
Talking about me, not DeRozan.
He had like 42 points, like 16 rebounds, and all of that jazz. And him and
DeRozan won by 2.
Yeah, which, well, I know Skip and Shannon are going to have a field day with that tomorrow, undisputed. But it was cool to see. And Magic Johnson had a tweet that I did like. How, I don't know, he was like, thank you, LeBron, for coming to the Drew League.
It's possible to like a Magic Johnson tweet. He must have done really good.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that part about the Drew League. It was the part that he said that with LeBron playing there, a lot of people who cannot afford like tickets to the Crypto Center, aka Staples Center, they got to see him play in person for a much cheaper thing, which that part I did really appreciate, because we forget, man, like when we talk about load management, which was one of my biggest things, these tickets ain't cheap. Like, they're really not. So like when you save up paycheck after paycheck after paycheck to go to games to see one player, and that player decides, I don't feel like playing today, I'm going to do load management, it sucks. So, but Magic saying that, I really did, that brought it home. Like, dang, that's actually a really good point, Magic.
It is a good point. Memphis Grizzlies hosting the Milwaukee Bucks back in March. I was like 8 rows off the floor. I was driving down to Memphis on a Friday, and news broke that Ja was going to be out. And that was the first game of that long outage he was out, and I was devastated. But, you know, even for, you're right. I mean, it's when players can't play, like it kills you. And then obviously, again, everything you put into being able to carve out time and, you know, figure out parking and pay for tickets. You're exactly right. You know, to the Drew League piece, so there's a foundation behind it. Highly encourage listeners to go look that up and see all the good work they do in communities across the country. But it's really got a grassroots feel to it. Like, it's that Rucker Park is just authentic basketball where, like, you know, they're still a referee, they're still calling fouls, you know, here and there and stuff. But like, it's just a little bit more like, you know, you don't have to get your team in the flow of an offense. You can just chuck it to LeBron in the post, and you can just chuck it a bunch of times. Like, and heat check himself and dunk on fools. Like, and that's what he did. I mean, these poor guys who like found out the day before, hey, LeBron's gonna lace them up tomorrow. Like, what the heck? And like, you know, these are good players that are never are gonna make it in the NBA, but it's so good. And you know, this is their Super Bowl thing to be involved with this. But you know, while we're in a lull of the off season here, heading into July, unless Kevin Durant trade news breaks or Donovan Mitchell news breaks on a trade, I highly encourage folks, if you've not already seen Adam Sandler's new movie, because it's got some vibes of Drew League piece in it too, to go out and see that on Netflix. So Rancho Hernan Gomez plays this guy named Bo Cruz, who Sandler scouts and just finds one night out overseas, just playing, you know, in a park league, packed house, camera phones, everything else, and you know, gets him to get drafted in the NBA. So if you haven't had a chance to go see that and you're missing basketball in the next month or so, go see that. But there's just something authentic about, you know, again, just that neighborhood environment, that small town environment, and a packed gym, and all the oohs and ahs, and you know, the hype up stuff. That like it was awesome to see LeBron back in the fold. And Kyrie allegedly was supposed to play yesterday too, and changed his mind. Imagine that. He was a Lakers assistant coach, former Cavs assistant coach Phil Handy's camp for kids. But like, clearly it spoke into existence where they're expecting to come. He didn't show.
Just quick things. You brought up Memphis. John Morant, which I think was obviously with the media taken way out of context, and ESPN getting gypped thinking a tweet from Ballsack, whatever sports thing was real, saying that he would cook MJ. That obviously got a whole bunch of things.
I like the Moxie.
Yes. Yeah. So obviously every player thinks they're going to cook whoever is guarding them. That's just the way players are. And so I really didn't think anything of it. He didn't say he was better than him. He just said he would cook him, which he probably would get him a couple plays. But let's just get this straight. If they play one-on-one, John Morant would get smoked. And that's it from that.
Easy.
But Evan, man, anything else before we close? I know we are catching up our listeners on a whole bunch of NBA stuff, so we apologize for being away and having a super long pod for y'all, but at least you get all this basketball content, and we'll be back. When, like Evan said, if KD gets traded, Donovan Mitchell, there's a whole bunch of offseason news we didn't hit on, but we will be back soon, so we will not be far away. Evan, anything else?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we've covered most of it. We'll be back on the event. One of those two major trades happens. But other than that, we'll be getting ready for the season and camps that start up in September. So it'll be a while without basketball. So we're gonna find something to fill us in.
It's okay. We live in a state where our state season begins next month with Ohio State college football coming back.
State college football. So we'll be there shortly, but nope, we'll break trade news when it comes up. Other than that.
With that being said, thank you everyone for listening to the L7C podcast. Make sure you like, rate, comment, subscribe. Thank you all again for the continued support you guys have been showing this mom and pop podcast, and we really appreciate it. And we'll keep giving you great content. With that being said, thank you for listening to L7C podcast. Signing out. Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.